In this segment of the tutorial, we'll discuss how behavior is studied. We'll include an introduction, the anthropomorphism, ultimate and proximate causes, behavioral patterns, and innate components of behavior. Ethology. Ethology is a combination of laboratory and field science and is a subdiscipline of zoology. This field of science is interested in the behavioral processes like aggression in many unrelated animals or species. Behavioral ecology. Behavioral ecology is the study of the ecology and evolutionary basis for an animal behavior. They want to understand the adaptive nature of behavior, both in its intrinsic as well as its extrinsic aspects. For instance, why does a giraffe preferentially eat the leaves at the top of trees, even though it could reach the lower branches equally well? Anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is the tendency to think that human feelings, reasoning, and motivation apply to animals. This type of thinking implies that the animal has a kind of conscious awareness. Ultimate cause. The ultimate cause of a behavior is defined as the reason for a behavior on the evolutionary timescale. Ultimate cause attempts to explain why a trait exists. For instance, why do bats have sonar? Does it help them catch food, mate, avoid predators? These are called ultimate questions. The goal is to understand evolution. The ultimate approach is usually applied to ecological science. Proximate cause. Proximate causes explain behavior in terms of the here and now of ecological time. Proximate causation is divided into two factors called ontogenetic factors and mechanistic factors. Ontogenetic factors are the lifetime of experiences from embryo to death. Mechanistic factors are the processes of the body that give rise to a specific behavior, like hormones. Behavioral patterns. Behavior and behavioral patterns arise from three components. 1. Genetic inheritance, the nature of the organism. 2. Environmental influence, nurture. And 3. Experience and learning by the organism. Innate components of behavior. Fixed action pattern, abbreviated FAP, is an innate behavior. It depends on external signs, stimuli. It gets completed after initiation. Releasers are specific sign stimuli that function as communication signals between individuals of the same species. Concepts of innate releasing mechanisms and drive do not explain actual behavior mechanisms. Learning and behavior. In this segment of the tutorial, we'll introduce imprinting, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and insight learning. Learning behavior. There can be many types of learning behavior, including imprinting, classical conditioning, insight learning, and operant conditioning. Let's start with habituation. Behavior can be modified by learning in many ways, including habituation. Habituation is a simple kind of learning. It involves the loss of sensitivity to an unimportant stimuli. For instance, an animal responds to a stimulus, but if there's no reward or harmful consequence, it stops responding. So, if a stuffed owl is put into a cage with a songbird, at first the songbird is frightened. After a while, the songbird will stop responding to the owl's presence. It has been habituated. Imprinting. Imprinting is a type of learned behavior with a significant innate component. This is acquired during a limited critical period. An example of this is the behavior of newly hatched geese. Those reared by the mother show normal behavior and imprint on the mother, following the mother around and treating her like the mother. Artificially incubated and hatched eggs spent their first few hours with a researcher and steadfastly followed him and showed no recognition of their own mother. Classical conditioning. Classical conditioning involves linking one stimulus with another. It's a type of associative learning. An example of this is that when a bell was rung, a dog was fed. This caused the dog to drool. After a while, when the bell was rung, the dog began to drool even though he was not being fed. Operant conditioning. Trial and error learning. It's a type of associative learning exhibited by many animals. Operant conditioning involves the modification of voluntary behavior through the use of consequences, which may be positive or negative. B.F. Skinner rewarded rats in a box when they pressed the correct lever for food. The rats quickly learned to press the lever that rewarded them. Remember, operant conditioning involves voluntary behavior as opposed to classical conditioning. Insight learning. It involves the ability to reason by correctly performing a task on the first attempt in a situation in which the animal has had no earlier experience. Some higher primates exhibit insight, but most animals lack any such capability. If a chimpanzee is placed in an area with a banana hung too high, the chimp will deduce that he can stack the boxes in his area to reach the bananas. Insight is best developed in primates and other mammals. Behavioral rhythms. In this segment of the tutorial, we'll introduce rhythmic behavior and circa-annual behavior. Rhythmic behavior. Endogenous clocks or behavioral clocks dictate various daily behaviors. The endogenous clock often needs exogenous cues to keep the behavior and the clock properly timed with the real world. Example: a nocturnal animal that is kept in a constantly lit environment. The animal will continue to be more active during its night, even though it's still light. The precision of the endogenous clocks may change over time without external cues to keep it timed correctly. Circa-annual behaviors. Circa-annual behaviors such as breeding and hibernation are directed by physiological and hormonal changes influenced by exogenous factors like daylight length.